Chapter 52. A young man is wounded in an athletic contest. A hero tears down a house to collect a debt. The fourth Mr. Fing said goodbye to Secretary Wan and traveled alone to Hangzhou, where he had a friend named Qin Ching Kung, to whom he had lent several dozen taels of silver. I may as well look him up, he thought, and collect the debt for my journey home. Qin lived outside Qiantang Gate, and Feng set out to find him. He had not gone far when he saw a group of men gathered around two riders who were practicing their horsemanship under the willows of Su Dike. One of the riders recognized Feng from a distance. "Fourth brother Feng," he shouted, "where have you come from?" As Feng drew near, this rider dismounted and seized his hand. "So it's the second Mr. Qin," exclaimed Feng. "When did you arrive, and what are you doing here?" "I fancy your being away so long," declared Qin. "What are Wan's troubles to do with you? Aren't you a fool when your own slate is clean to interfere in other people's business? Well, I'm very glad that you're back. Eighth brother Hu here and I have been thinking of you." "What is the gentleman's name?" "This is Mr. Hu, the eighth son of Minister Hu of Hangzhou. He's very good company and one of my closest friends." When Hu learned who he was, he and Feng exchanged compliments. "Since fourth brother Feng has come, let's stop riding and go to my rooms for a drink," suggested Qin. "I have another friend to look up," objected Feng. "Look for your friend tomorrow," said Hu. "This chance is too good to miss. Let's go now to Qin's rooms." They would not take no for an answer, but laid hold of Feng and ordered the groom to bring another horse for him. Upon reaching Wu Su Husu's temple, they dismounted and went in. Qin lived on the ground floor of a house at the back. Feng went in, bowed and sat down. Qin ordered a meal at once, saying they would drink with their rice. "Fourth brother Feng's return is a great occasion," said Qin to Hu. "Tomorrow you'll see a fine athletic display. Another day we shall call on you to pay our respects. We'll be troubling you all the time." "You must certainly come," said Hu. Feng pointed at a scroll he saw on the wall. "I used to know this Hung Ken He Sin," he remarked. "There was a time when he studied the military arts, but later, I don't know why, he started dabbling in the occult and persuaded people to practice alchemy. Is he still alive, I wonder?" "That was quite a joke," said Hu. "My third brother was nearly swindled by him. That year, Hung had made friends with Ma Chun Shang of Chu Chao, and they talked my brother into making the Philosopher's Stone. The silver was already done up in packages when, luckily for my brother, Hung suddenly fell ill and a few days later died. My brother would have lost all his money otherwise." Is your brother's name Hu Qin?" "It is. He and I are totally unlike. He makes friends with a pack of nondescript fellows who write verses and call themselves scholars. He hasn't drunk a single caddy of good wine or eaten a single caddy of good meat, yet he lets himself be cheated of hundreds and thousands of taels of silver without so much as blinking. I've always liked to keep a stable, but he used to find fault with my horses, claiming they messed up his yard. Not long ago, when I'd had enough of this, I made over the old house to him and moved out. I've made a clean break with him. Eighth brother's new place is very clean," said Qin. "When we call on him, fourth brother, you'll see for yourself." Wine was brought in and they started toasting each other. "Fourth brother," said Qin when they were slightly tipsy, "who is the friend you said you were looking for?" "A local man called Qin Ching Kung. He owes me a little silver and I thought of collecting the debt." "Used he to live in Bamboo Road?" asked Hu. "Has he moved near Qiantang Gate?" "That's the man." "He's not at home just now. He's gone with Whiskers Mao to Nanking to sell silk. Whiskers was one of my brother's protégés. You needn't go to look for him, fourth brother. I'll send a servant with a message for you, asking him to call on you when he comes back." When the meal was finished, the party broke up. Hu said goodbye and went home, but Qin kept Fang as his guest. The next day he took Feng to call on Hu, who later returned the call. Then Hu sent a servant to say, "My master invites both you gentlemen to come early tomorrow for a simple meal. He says he won't send invitation cards to close friends. The next day after breakfast, Chin called for 2 horses. Accompanied by a servant, he and Fing rode to Hu's house. The host welcomed them and they sat down in the hall. Why don't we sit in the library? Asked Chin. Wait till we've had some tea, said Hu. After tea, he took them to the back by a path which was covered with horse dung. In the library they found some other guests, the horsemen and swordsmen with whom Hu spent most of his time. These sportsmen had come today to see what Fing could do. Everyone bowed and sat down. These friends are all kindred spirits, said Hu. When they heard you would be here today, 4th brother, they came to learn from you. You flatter me, said Fing. After another cup of tea, they went outside to stroll. The 2-storied building with 3 rooms in which Hu lived was not very large. There were covered walks all round it, cluttered up with saddles and quivers of arrows leaning against the wall. Having passed through a moon gate, they came to a big courtyard and stable. Second brother Chin, said Hu. The other day I brought a new horse, quite a likely nag. I'd like to know how much you think it's worth. He ordered a groom to lead the roan horse over, and the guests crowded round to look. The horse was a spirited one. Because they were not on their guard, it lashed out with one hind leg and kicked one young guest in the thigh. He crumpled up on the ground, doubled up with pain. He flew into a rage. Striding forward with a well-aimed kick, he broke the horse's leg. The others gasped. Some kick that, Chin exclaimed. All this time I haven't seen you. You must have been improving it. They sent the young guest home. Then a feast was spread and they sat down to eat. The host and his 7 guests played the finger game. With big bowls and big dishes, they all made a hearty meal. Now, 4th brother, said Chin when they rose from the table, you must show us what you can do. The others chimed in to second this request. I shall only disgrace myself, said Feng. What would you like me to do? He pointed to a raised flower bed in the yard. Let's have a few of those square bricks carried over. Chin ordered a servant to carry 8 bricks to the side of the steps. They watched as Feng rolled up his right sleeve. The 8 bricks were piled up neatly, over 4 feet high, on the steps. Feng clapped his hand on the top brick, and all 8 were smashed into fragments right to the bottom of the pile. The other men applauded. 4th brother is a master in this, observed Chin. That boxing manual of his says, his clenched fist can shatter a tiger's head, and with the side of his palm he can fell an ox. But this is not his most remarkable skill. Here, 8th brother Hu. You must have powerful muscles in the leg with which you kicked that horse just now. If you dare kick Feng in the groin, you'll deserve your reputation. No, you can't do that, the others laughed. If you care to try, Mr. Hu, said Feng, you're welcome. If I'm hurt, I won't blame you, but Mr. Chin. If Mr. Feng is willing, said the others, he must be fairly confident. They urged Hu to go ahead. This Feng is no Titan or giant, thought Hu. Why should I be afraid? Very well, 4th brother, he said. I'll make so bold as to kick you. Feng raised the front of his gown. Then Hu's right foot flew up, and with all his might he kicked Feng in the groin. But, most extraordinary, it did not feel like flesh that Hu was kicking, but like a piece of iron. His toes were nearly broken, and he almost fainted with pain. For some time he could not move that leg at all. Forgive me, said Feng, walking up to him. All the spectators were amazed and diverted. After a little more horseplay, they thanked their host and left. Hu limped to the door to see them off, but on his return could not pull off his boot, however hard he tried. His foot was swollen and painful for a week. Feng stayed with Chin and boxed or rode each day, so he was never bored. One day he was practicing boxing when in walked a thin, short man of about 20, who asked for the 4th Mr. Feng of Nanking. Feng saw it was Chin Kung's nephew, Chin the Shrimp. He asked him why he had come. The other day Mr. Hu sent to say you had arrived, said the Shrimp. My uncle has gone to Nanking to sell silk, and I'm going there now to accompany him back. I can take him a message for you. I wanted to meet him, that's all. He borrowed 50 taels from me, and I'd like it returned as soon as convenient. I shall be staying here for some time, so I'll wait for him to come back. Please give your uncle my best regards. I shan't be writing now." The shrimp assented, went home and packed, then took a boat to Nanking. He went to Fu's silk shop in front of Jiangning County Yamen to find his uncle. Qin Ching Kung was eating at one table with Whiskers Mao. He bade his nephew join them and asked for news of home. The shrimp gave him the fourth Mr. Fing's message, then unpacked his luggage upstairs. This Whiskers Mao, who had a thread shop in Hangzhou, had started with 2,000 taels capital, then integrated himself with the third Mr. Hu and made another 2,000 out of him. With this he moved to Chie Sing and opened a small pawn shop. He was miserly to an inordinate degree, prizing 1 copper as highly as his life. Recently he had joined forces with Chen to sell silk, and since Chen was another man who prized 1 copper as highly as his life, the two of them hit it off well together. Now the buyers of Nanking's Silk Guild fared better than buyers elsewhere. "The guild head gives us meat every meal," said Whiskers Mao to Chen. This is not his meat, but ours. He'll be making us pay for it. We'd better just eat his vegetables and buy our own meat in future. Won't that work out much cheaper?" "You're quite right," agreed Ching Ching Kung. When mealtime came, he told the shrimp to buy 14 coppers worth of sausage at the cooked meat stall for the 3 of them. Very little of this was the shrimp himself able to eat, but he had to suffer in silence. One day Whiskers said to Chen, "I heard from a friend yesterday that Secretary Chen in Rouge Lane wants to go to Peking to give himself a post, but he can't raise the money all at once. He wants to borrow 1,000 taels at a 70% discount. He's a very safe customer and is bound to pay you back within 3 months. You've over 200 taels, brother, left from that sum of buying silk. Why not weigh out 210 taels to lend to him? In 3 months you'll get 300 back. You'll make more out of this than selling silk. If you don't believe me, I'll write you a guarantee. I know his middleman. Nothing can go wrong." Chen took his advice, and 3 months later Whiskers returned his capital with interest. The silver was of the finest, the weight was fair, and Chen was simply delighted. Another time Whiskers said, "I met a friend yesterday, a man who sells ginseng. He told me that the 9th Mr. Hisu in the palace has a cousin, the 4th Mr. Chen, who brought over a caddy of ginseng from him. Now this merchant wants to go back to Suzhou, and Mr. Chen can't lay hands on so much silver, so he's willing to borrow at a 50% discount to repay him. If you lend him 100 taels, he'll repay you 200 at the end of 2 months. This deal is completely safe too." Jim produced another 100 taels for Whiskers to lend. At the end of 2 months, he received a good 200 taels. There was 30 cents over, in fact. Chin was in raptures. The shrimp was so shabbily treated by Whiskers Mao that he had no wine or meat, and he felt as bitter as the sourest vinegar. One day he said to Chin, "Uncle, you're here to sell silk. When you've extra money, you should give it to the guild head to buy silk. If you buy the best silk and pawn it, you can make a pretty profit. With that profit, you can buy more silk and get more from the pawn shop. The interest asked by the pawn shop is very small. In that way, buying and pawning with 1,000 taels capital, you can make 2,000 taels. Wouldn't that be better? Why do you always listen to Whiskers Mao and act as a moneylender? Lending money is always a risky business. And if you keep hanging on here, when shall we go home?" "Never mind," said Chen. "In a few more days we'll pack up and go back." One day Whiskers Mao received a letter from home. When he read it, he smacked his lips and sat there lost in thought. "What's the news from your home?" said Chen. "Why are you thinking so hard?" "It's nothing," said Whiskers Mao. "I don't like to mention it." Chen asked him again and again. "Here's a letter from my son," said Whiskers. "The Tan family pawn shop in the East Street has gone bankrupt and is to be mortgaged. They've a room full of goods worth 1,600 taels. Now they're desperate, they'll let them go for 1,000. I was thinking that if I could get those goods for my pawn shop, it'd be a good stroke of business. But it can't be done. I haven't the ready money." "Why don't you bring someone else in?" "I thought of that. If I raised a loan from someone willing to take 1 point per 8 interest, I could still make a little profit. But if you wanted 2% or more, I'd miss the goat flesh and just get the smell of the goat. That wouldn't be worth my while." "Don't be such a fool," cried Chen. Why couldn't you ask my help? I've still a little silver I can lend you for the steal. I'm not afraid you'll cheat me." No, there's always a risk in business. If I were to lose and find I couldn't repay you, I would never be able to face you again." Impressed by his sincerity, Chen insisted on lending him the silver. "Let's work it out together properly," he said. "You can take this silver of mine to buy up his goods. I won't ask you for a high interest, just 2% a month. The bulk of the profit will be yours, and you can repay me in installments later. Even if you don't repay me in full, we're such old friends that I shan't hold it against you." "That is very good of you, brother. But we need a middleman to write a detailed promissory roll for you to keep as evidence. Then you needn't worry. We can't just arrange this between the two of us." "I know you're reliable. I'm not worrying. We not only don't need a middleman, there's no need for a written agreement. We'll rely on mutual trust." Thereupon, without telling the shrimp, Chin took all the silver left in his bag as well as the debts he had collected, and made a package of 1,000 taels which he gave to Whisker's Mow. "I'm waiting for the guild head to fix a price for my silk," he said. "I meant to use the silver to buy some more silk in Hu Chao, but now I'll give it to you, brother, to go back and put through that deal. After a few more days, I'll be leaving too." Whiskers thanked him and took the silver. The next day he boarded a boat and went back to Chie Seng. Some days later, Chen Ching Fu finished collecting payment for his silk, took his leave of the guild head, and boarded a boat with the shrimp for Hang Chow. Since their boat had to pass Chie Seng, they went ashore there to call on Whisker's Mow. His small pawn shop was in the West Street. Having been directed there, they found a three-roomed building overlooking the street and a spirit screen. They went in and looked around the spirit screen, and in the courtyard saw another building in which counters had been built. A few assistants were doing business there. "Is this the second Mr. Mao's pawn shop?" asked Chen. "What is your name, sir?" asked an assistant behind the counter. I am Chen Chung Kong. I've come from Nanking to see Mr. Mao." "Please take a seat inside," said the assistant. Behind there was a 2-storied storehouse. They went in and sat down, and an assistant brought them tea. "Is Mr. Mao at home?" asked Chen as he sipped his tea. "This shop used to belong to Mr. Mao," was the reply, "but he turned it over to our master, Mr. Wang." "Did he come here the other day?" Chen was taken aback. "This isn't a shop. Why should he come here?" "Where is he now?" "He wanders all over the place. He may have gone to Nanking or even Peking." The horse's mouth didn't fit the donkey's head. This story didn't tally with Whisker's Mow. Chen broke into a cold sweat. He went back to the boat with the shrimp, and they traveled straight home. The next morning someone knocked at the gate, and when they opened it there was the 4th Mr. Feng. They invited him into the hall, and greetings were exchanged. "I should have returned your silver long ago," said Chen. "Unfortunately, a few days ago I was cheated, so I've no way of paying you at present." Feng asked what had happened, and Chen told him the whole story. "Never mind," said Feng. "Just leave it to me. Tomorrow I'm setting off for Nanking with Mr. Chen. Wait for me in Chie Seng. I promise to get you back your money, not a cent short. How about that?" "If you will do that, I can never thank you enough, sir." "Don't say any more about thanks." Feng went back to Chen's room and told him this. "So you found another job," said Chen. "How you enjoy such missions." He ordered a servant to pay the rent and pack, then they boarded a boat at Broken Bay. "I'll come with you to watch the fun," said Chen as they were nearing Chie Seng. He went ashore with Feng, and they walked to Whisker's Mow's pawn shop. They found Chen Ching Feng making a scene inside. Taking 2 steps in one, Feng strode past the spirit screen. "Is that fellow Mao in?" he shouted. "Is he going to repay the silver he owes Chen or not?" Before the assistants could come out to answer him, Feng grasped the gate with both hands, bent back a little, then brought half the wall down with a crash. Chen, who was coming in to watch, was nearly knocked on the head. The customers and assistants simply gaped. Feng swung around and strode to the second building, where he stood with his back to one of the counter pillars. "If you value your lives, then hurry up and clear out." He put his hands behind him and wrenched, uprooting the pillar and twisting it crooked. Half the ceiling collapsed, while bricks and tiles came hurtling down and a cloud of dust sprang up. Luckily for them, the assistants had taken quickly to their heels, so none of them lost their lives. By this time, the passengers had heard the crash, and a crowd gathered round to watch. Whisker's Mow saw the game was up and had to come out. Fing, his face streaked with dust, looked more energetic than ever. He walked into the storehouse and stood with his back to the main pillar there. The others rushed forward to plead with him, and Whiskers admitted his fault and promised to pay Chin back in full if Mr. Fing would stop pulling down his property. Fing roared with laughter. "However large a nest you had," he cried, "in the time it takes for a meal I could raise it to the ground." By now Chin and Chin were sitting there. "You were in the wrong, Brother Mao," said Chin. "You thought, because there was no middleman, Chin couldn't take the case to court or sue you, so you tried to trick him. But you know the saying, never mind how poor the debtor is, it's the courage of the one who dones that matters. Now you've met your match here in fourth Brother Fing. There was nothing that Whiskers Wang could do but return the loan with interest. And so this trouble was settled. When Chin had the silver, he saw Chin and Fing to their boat. And when they had washed their faces, he gave Fing 100 taels and 2 packets to show his appreciation. "It was my whim to help you," chuckled Fing. "I don't want any thanks. I'll keep the 50 taels you owed me, but you must take the other 50 taels back." Chin thanked him again and again as he pocketed the silver. Then he said goodbye, hired a small boat, and left. Laughing and talking all the way, Chin and Fing soon reached Nanking and went to their homes. 2 days later, Fing went to Rouge Lane to call on Secretary Chin. "Our master is never at home now," said the gateman. "He's been spending all his time recently with the 4th Mr. Chin from Taiping Prefecture, amusing himself in the Chang House at Welcome Pavilion." When Fing saw the secretary later, he warned him against such behavior. Just then, as luck would have it, a letter came from the capital announcing that Chin's appointment would soon be published. So he packed and set out for Peking. Only the 4th Mr. Chin was left at Welcome Pavilion. But to know what this Welcome Pavilion was like, you must read the chapter which follows.